where secrets lie. There's a cure they try to hide. Dr. Kimchi, he's the guy with a mission and a spicy side. Dr. Kimchi, you're the one. Fighting battles, making puns. With your unity supply, we'll make cancer secrets fly. Yeah. Whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, 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 yeah. Whoa, whoa, whoa. From the blockchain to the moon, real solutions coming soon. Chemotherapy's a scam. Dr. Kimchi's got the master plan. Dr. Kimchi, you're the one. Yeah, 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 yeah. Fighting battles, making puns. Yeah, 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 yeah. With your unity supply. Yeah, 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 yeah. We'll make cancer secrets fly. Locking 21% away for a brighter, better day. Kimchi power in our hands. Together we'll take a stand. Oh, Dr. Kimchi, you're the one. Fighting battles, having fun. With your unity supply, we'll make cancer secrets die. Join the mission, spread the word. Dr. Kimchi's voice must be heard. With the power of the crowd, we'll make cancer cure so proud. Curing cancer with a grin. Dr. Kimchi's here to win. Unity and spice combined for a future bright and fine.
Because I know we're going to get very spiritual, it's good to lower the vibration a little bit by bragging. I find that's a good idea to start low with some bragging and then build it up. So I'm going to tell you that I am in Bali right now.
Are we already recording? Are we already recording here?
So it's nice. First time in Bali.
Oh yeah? Nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful people, very much loving and in their heart. But man, it's busy. They are building and it's just crazy. And traffic now.
Trust me. I have been there 20 years ago and, I guess it's probably very different by now. That's what people tell me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you all good with you?
It's good. Yeah. It's interesting. The last year, between like 2020 and peaking around 2020, I had just had a lot of spiritual awakening stuff. So I was in a really love and oneness vibe for like a couple of years. Just everything was love. It was wonderful. And then last year I kind of came back down to reality where I'm like, oh, okay, good. Still a person with cool spiritual stories. Excellent. So noticing this is what I'll be making content about soon. And it's very interesting that even though you may have all these profound, amazing, beautiful experiences, even after all that total, like, oh my God, there's only God, it's all God, still the shadow is there. There's still patterns. The patterns start coming up again, and it's such a bummer because when you're in the experience of the truth, there's no shadow, there's no ego, there's nothing, there's no separation. It's just love, right? It's all things. It's just love. But eventually, unless you're Sri Ramana Maharishi or maybe Osho or something, you unfortunately go back to being a human. So it's very
Yes,
interesting.
welcome to the human race, I would
Yeah,
say, right?
yeah. So
You
it's very
know,
interesting.
just another round of, working through some shadow parts which have not been fully integrated, I would think, right?
But it's very interesting though, because it's almost it's yes, there's always the integration of shadow, but there's also integration of self-realization, which is I didn't even
Of
that's a
course.
whole thing. Like I'm just real because
Yes.
again, when you're
Yes.
in it, there's no problem, but years after you're like, did that happen? Did I like it's unbelievable. And then to go back into sort of normal life after all this, it's quite a thing. I'm
Yeah.
still integrating.
Some people, who had this major awakening experience, they can't even function in normal life anymore, and then they just go into silence, hiding away somewhere because they just can't function, in the normal world, right? There are different stages also of the integration of the enlightenment.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I hear people saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that. In the peak of some of the experiences, I couldn't actually go and do any. I couldn't get on a bus. Like I couldn't pay for a bus
Yeah, that's
ticket.
what I mean. That's what I
Yeah,
mean. People get functional in normal life, or you have a feeling of it doesn't make any sense to be in this body for what, Consciousness is all there is. So why would I be in a body, in the limitation of a body?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, have you also had some, you know,
I would say I had also major satori experiences, right? But as you say, they also come and go. I wouldn't say I live in it 24/7, for sure not. I think therefore my whole system still carries too much anxiety and dysregulation and all that. But, I don't seek enlightenment any longer. I seek, my authenticity and live from that place. That's what really interests me. And then how that affects my life. I totally dropped seeking enlightenment. That's not the goal anymore for me, and it had been the goal for so many years, chasing the big experience, chasing the peak experiences. No, I don't. I just don't.
oh, this is a really interesting topic for me. Because I also was very hardcore because I wanted to wake up. I really wanted to know the truth. So that phase went about 10 years, and then I had all these, experiences. But it's
Yeah.
interesting because the part of me that was seeking wasn't seeking. And then I thought, well, I actually believed, oh, there's nothing more for me. That's it. I'm finished. And that's dangerous because once you come out of those states and the shadow and the patterns to come up again, the egos, you might have the spiritual ego that says, oh, well, I don't need to work on myself. I'm finished. I'm already enlightened. So very dangerous, very dangerous. So I saw that in myself, and then I was real enough to say, okay, I may have had all these beautiful experiences, and I can talk about all that, but I still have my shit, and I may be more aware of it. It's not the ego is not as strong as it was for sure, but it's still there. I still have to work to do the work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's actually good that it's this way. It also keeps you humble and kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally dropped that whole idea as
Yeah.
a state. And still, whenever you hit those states, being in the absolute, being in a different dimension, I sometimes feel like, oh, that's the only place which makes sense. I just don't want to come back from it. But then still, you have to clean the flat, you have to see your clients, you have to go shopping, and it's just part of the human nature or having a body, right? Okay, so let's start recording because I really need to finish at 11 o'clock because then I have a client.
Okay. And what time is it there now?
It's now 9:15.
Okay, that's cool. We have
Early
lots of time.
morning. I'm still
Well,
hearing my voice in the morning.
I started the recording. I actually think what we've been talking about is fascinating. So.
Oh, the recording was already happening.
Yeah. It's nice that way. Like Joe Rogan, it's all chill. It's already recording, and next thing you know, boom, you're in a life-changing conversation.
And we just continue.
Yeah, we just continue. Um, but just to wrap up on that point, I think it's one of the most, I think, important conversations right now because more and more people. I mean, you've been in the spiritual game longer than me, but I think you'll agree. There's more and more people actually having spiritual awakening experiences, discovering shadow. I mean, than any point in history. I can't imagine. Like right now, everyone and their cousin is like, "Oh, have you heard about self?" Just everyone is getting into it, and so I
Yeah,
think it's never been more important to really get the information across on every level about the journey and what it is, and staying humble and doing the work because it's really really profound, and there's so many traps where we can get stuck. And that's just
right.
one of them I was talking about, thinking, oh, well, I woke up, I'm finished. We're not done if we're in a human body. So anyway, I think it's a really important conversation, that
Yeah,
we're
I
going
mean,
into.
I think, yeah, sorry. I mean, I think, yeah, I'm also happy that more and more people are waking up, but it also shows, there's also more darkness happening. It's the physical law that where there's light, there is darkness. And, not just your personal darkness, but, the collective darkness at work. So, you know, I'm happy that people waking up. And then at the same time, let's say what I, experience in my daily life, in my private practice, like anxiety, depressions are on the rise.
Mm,
It's insane. It's like an epidemic, how many people suffer of, you know, burnout, depression, anxiety, feeling afraid of the future.
mm,
It seems like also life has become a little bit more unsafe for people, and whenever things become more unsafe, our nervous system, of course, is completely on red alert, Our amygdala says alert, 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 alert. How can I fix that? So that's a bit worrying with everything, seeing that people waking up, but at the same time, this is also happening, right? Especially in young men.
mm,
That's strange enough. Like anxiety focus going up like that, through the whole disembodiment they experience, growing up with weak fathers who are not showing up or leaving the family, yeah, not knowing how to make real contact, in the not digital world, yeah. So these are all big issues right now, yeah. But also more men are willing to do the work. Like in my
mm.
retreats, for example, since the last 2, 3 years, I usually have more men in the retreat than women, and it always had been the other way around, especially let's say in the yoga scene, usually there is 90% women and then maybe 1, 2 men, but I'm not in the yoga scene. But what I'm saying is, men are much more willing now to do the work too. Yeah.
That's good news. So I like how we dove in, but let's just rewind a little bit because I'm sure some people are thinking, who is this woman? It seems like she knows what she's talking about. What's her story? So just a little bit about you and your background
Yes.
and kind of how you got into this fascinating profession that you're in.
Okay. So, I work as a psychologist since 35 years by now. And, I focus on helping people to heal wounds of the past. I work with embodied spirituality, not just as a concept. So it's a lot about trauma healing and just helping people, to live their human nature in the light and the shadow, of course, because the shadow is always something we like to, push into the basement of our psyche. So I run a busy private practice in downtown Munich here, but I've been running workshops all over the world. So I also have a really nice international crowd of clients, yeah, all very committed to do the work, right? To learn how to live from your authentic self versus the conditioned self, right? So I work a lot with, how to work through all those layers of the conditioning, the false self, in order to reach the real you. I'm also the of a 7-day program. It's called the Primal Childhood Deconditioning, which you know, right? It's a deep dive journey, rediscovering what made you you before the world told you how to be and how to behave and what is right and what is wrong. Yeah. So I'm very passionate about what I'm doing, and sometimes because, I'm not that young and people start asking me now, when you're going to retire? Then I always say, retire from what? From what should I retire? This is my life purpose. And when you have found your life purpose, it's not that you choose it actually. It just totally happened in my case. Yeah. Then there is just no plan B. You just show up and do the work. So that whole question of retiring and then staying at home knitting socks, or I don't know, not for me, right? That's not.
Though I think you'd
So
make a great sock maker. I can see you just sitting there,
I don't even
super
know
cute.
how.
With those glasses on and a cup of hot chocolate, I think you'd be
Exactly.
amazing.
Okay, I'm gonna get a pair of socks for you. Yeah, so this is my life actually. I have dedicated my own personal search, and supporting people in that. This is, what my life is about, I would say. And I think I feel very fortunate that I found my purpose and can live from that, because then it never gets boring, right?
That's right.
I'm fascinated about learning things which interest me, updating myself always with the latest research in neuroscience and psychology. I find that just interesting. And, so yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
So let's start simple for maybe some people who they find this interview, they have no idea. What is shadow work?
That's a great question, of course. Shadow work, it was first basically, it came into psychology through Carl Gustav Jung. He was that very brilliant student of Freud. He, in the Western psychology, he started with, the term shadow work, but shadow work actually exists much longer. You find it already in traditional Buddhism, you find it in shamanism, you find shadow work in the Greek history. Yeah, so he just basically introduced it to Western psychology in a very beautiful way. In a nutshell, well, let's start like that, because then you can already kind of experience it in yourself. What I like to do at this point, sometimes I ask people, take a piece of paper and imagine. So tomorrow, when you open your social media in the morning with your coffee and start judging everybody, right? So that's what I sometimes do, just
Yeah.
okay. So, or if you're old school and you read newspaper, um, somebody had exposed everything about you which you rather would like to hide, the things you don't want that anybody would notice about you, and somebody would have written about that, and you basically have it right in your face. I mean, just to think about that, it already creates sweaty palms for some people, or their heartbeat is rising. Yeah, so basically, once you write that down and then you read through that, it could be, things you feel ashamed about, things you feel unworthy, things you rather like to hide. You don't want that anybody knows that you do that. It could be your addictions, weird or even violent fantasies you have, weird sexual stuff. Yeah. And you read that, that's where you find your shadow, exactly in that list. All the things which you are hiding, basically, often not just only from yourselves, because we also hide those things from ourselves, but you definitely hide it from other people. Yeah. And that's, all the stuff our psyche had to push away. Of course, it comes from childhood. Yeah, you could say, like, each child kind of immediately creates two lists. The right side of the list would be all the things I have to do to be loved in this family, to get acknowledged, to to be accepted. Maybe if I'm a very nice girl or a very quiet girl or a very funny girl, maybe that brings me the attention in my family. Yeah. Or if I'm a little helper, mother's little helper, daddy's little princess, all the things I learned. Okay, if I do that, if I behave like that, then I will be accepted and belong to the system. And that you want to belong to the system, it's a biological need. It's not because I need or you need. We want to belong to a system. So that's the right side of your list. And then the left side of your list are all the things, which would endanger a bit your situation in the family, in the sense of, maybe if I'm too loud, that's not allowed, or I'm not allowed to be the center of the attention, I get judged for that. You always put yourself up front here. Or if I'm too sexual, too wild, too loud, too playful, too this, too that, This is when, you kind of feel, oh, if I behave like that, mommy and daddy will not like me, or it will not be accepted. Those are the parts you then push into the basement of your psyche, or you push those parts of you into exile, you could even say. But by pushing them away, they don't go away. They hold quite a charge there. So the shadow in us holds a big charge, It's not just something what we suppress and then end of the story. And then usually the stuff, which we have not been allowed to be or to do, those are the things we then later judge in people or irritates us in people. So Carl Gustav Jung says actually the fastest way to look at your own shadow is look into what irritates you about people. Let's say you get totally irritated if somebody, expressing their sexuality, up front. And you judge that, let's say you really judge that, then of course you need to look, okay, maybe that's exactly what I wasn't allowed to live my natural sexuality and I had to repress it. So what touching the other, is a very good way, to take it back and look, okay, what has that to do with me? And, the shadow work is not for the faint of hearts, I would say, because you have to take responsibility for those parts in you. You have to take responsibility what you judge in others, what that has to do with you, all your judgments we have about people, we need to look, okay, what does that say about me? Why get I so irritated? Yeah, but that's often what people don't want to do. It's easier to judge somebody than own that part in you, right? So shadow work is challenging, yeah, but I think if you want to rise up to your best potential, you have to do the shadow work. And that's, I think there's no bypassing around. I mean, look at the state of the world, the way people act out their shadow. It's insane. And there is not only like a personal shadow, countries have a collective shadow, organizations have a shadow, look at some spiritual communities and, who just think they just live in the love and the light and the bliss, right? But then you see, look at the structure, there is misuse of power, there is sexual abuse, and on and on and on, and refusing to look at that, and being compulsively positive, yeah, in love, light, bliss, is bypassing, clearly bypassing. So, it needs a willingness to look into, into darkness. So you have to open the can of worms. Right?
But if shadow work is so important, how come everybody avoids it at all costs?
Good question, because people like to be unconscious. It takes so much responsibility to look into shadow. It's uncomfortable to look into, okay, me jealous, me envious, me this, that, who wants to own that? You need to be basically, I always divide people into seekers and consumers. And if you're a consumer, couldn't care less. You just love to blame everybody around you. But if you're a seeker, you know, you want to look, okay, what does those judgments have to do with me in my own history, my own story? And sometimes people don't get it, you know. So when I start working with people on shadow, a lot of resistance comes up in people. Because, you know, they're challenged exactly in those things where they hold the pain, everything what we had to push away. This is where we hold our pain, our rage, our unworthiness, our shame, right?
It seems almost as if there's a switch. Like some people, when they discover, you know, the idea of working on oneself or shadow or self-improvement, even we can say, they're interested. They think, oh yes, I'm interested in working on myself. And other people, absolutely not. What do you think is the difference between the people who, you know, who want to do the work and others who absolutely are not interested?
Maybe for some people it's just too challenging and too painful to, you know, to look at those unowned parts in you, or they don't have the tools for it, right? Not everybody has the tools for it, or supportive environment to you know, to do the work. It also has to do with that. But whenever you know, you don't work with your shadow, it will show up sooner or later in your life. It might show up through all the stress-related diseases you develop. It shows up in, you know, in dysfunctional relationships. It shows up in your burnouts. It shows up in your, you know, in your shame, in your unworthiness. But some people, they don't want to deal with that stuff. You know, they feel more happy to have another beer and to zoom out and be unconscious. You know, some people just experience that kind of as bliss. This is ignorance is bliss, right? But you know, life is compassionate, I would say. Sooner or later, it brings you on your knees, you know, where you have to become vulnerable and humble and yes, okay, and look and feel and do the work, yeah. But even then, some people are completely refusing to do the work. You know, they don't see the wake up calls life gives you. And life is compassionate, you know, it can wait. Yeah, then we
Yep.
just wait for life.
Existence can be very patient.
Yeah,
So,
no,
so what would you, if I asked you, what are the top maybe two or three ways that that you've seen that the shadow really whacks people? Like, where does it really play out that you just keep seeing over and over? These are the main things that eventually bring people to their knees, you know?
it might show up in a very painful experience, let's say, you know, let's say in a divorce, or you lose a partner, or you lose a job, you know, or you're stuck in addictions. And all of a sudden you realize, okay, something is not working here, you know, something is not working. All the ways you hate yourself, you know, and those are some of the main signs that people are, or some people, you know, they just the other day, a guy, a very, you know, worldly, in the worldly sense, super successful, you know, he walked into my private practice even wearing a suit. That happens rarely, you know. And I already, when I saw him, I felt like, okay, Payne wearing a suit here, you know. And then he was sitting across me and he said, you know, I do all those things. I take cold plunges. I'm vegan. I do yoga. I'm chanting, you know, I do all those things. And still, I'm so fucking depressed. And I carry so much tension, and none of my relationships really work. You know, and that's interesting to see. You know, that's what sometimes people mix up, you know, doing all the so-called self-love practices. They are not wrong. Yeah. And it's nice that you drink your chamomile tea and have your hot bath and you know, do your mantras, but they don't heal you at the core. They don't heal your unmet needs. They don't heal your unexpressed rage. They don't heal your constant anxiety, you know. And you know, to go back to this example with that guy, basically, you know, what he had never processed through all the practices he did is, you know, his own pain of childhood, of not feeling seen, of not feeling supported, growing up with a very violent father. All that leaves scars in your nervous system and leaves your nervous system completely dysregulated. Yeah. And if you don't go to the very root cause of those symptoms, then you just don't heal. You just deal with symptoms. But I think, there's no big amount of kale you can eat in this world to to heal your wounds in there. And your nervous system, sometimes it takes years until it shows. Yeah. But the dysregulated nervous system, doesn't work at its optimum. It's constantly under stress. And of course, that affects everything. It affects your whole body. Yeah. So unprocessed stress, unprocessed anger creates, all those autoimmune diseases, for example, cancer and so on. Yeah. Shame often shows in digestion problems. Yeah. Grief shows in heart and lung diseases. Yeah. Emotional pressure shows in the migraines, the terrible back pain you get. Yeah. So those are just then somatized, but it's one thing, your unfinished business, your wounds and your body, you can't separate them. You just can't, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I had a really profound interview with a gentleman, a few actually, and they were talking about cancer, and they're just more and more learning that, there's people just having really deep breakthroughs, just talking, and they get to the root of whatever, some deep, deep issue they've had, and then they really have a breakthrough. They cry, they let it out. They go to the doctor a few days later, they say, there's no cancer, nothing. It's a miracle.
It can happen. The body actually, as I experience it, always wants to heal itself. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have a little wound here, miraculous, the body heals it. So I think the intention is always that the body wants to feel good and whole and healthy. But unmet needs, unexpressed rage, shame, unworthiness, it just keeps your whole nervous system in tension. Mm. Constantly. And then of course it shows as, then you can't sleep, for example, you have terrible headaches, you're irritable, you feel depressed. So it goes, of course, together, I mean, for people who are really interested how, our wounds, unhealed wounds, show in the body, like Dr. Gabor Maté did incredible research about that. There's this book, When the Body Says No. He's a physician, so he exactly worked through that, how trauma affects the body and how it shows in symptoms. And still, I mean, I'm personally so happy that finally, trauma seems to become a bit like mainstream. Yeah, so there's a whole paradigm shift happening. I have been dealing with healing trauma long before it became a hashtag, right? So, and nobody talked about trauma 30, 40 years ago. Yeah. So thank God, basically, trauma gets acknowledged by now. It has to be acknowledged by, I have been waiting for that since a long time. And still, you would be surprised. Like last year, I was renting out another room in my private practice, which became available. So a clinical psychologist showed up, who works in the hospital. And, as we talked, I shared, okay, my work is very trauma informed. I focus on trauma, healing trauma from the past. And he says, I'm focusing on depression. I don't know so much about trauma. And I was sitting there, I nearly fell off the chair. And I felt like, what? And he was a young guy. It was not like a 50, 60-year-old clinical psychologist. He was probably in his late 30s, So that guy, I mean, I was in disbelief that he thinks trauma and depression is something separate. And he only focuses on depression. I mean, depression is the classic symptom of trauma, right? So that just shows me, in the medical or in hospitals, they still don't talk about trauma. They just don't. They still kind of, probably there are exceptions by now, but they just deal with symptoms. They don't deal with what's underlying and what causes basically all those diseases and mental,
Well, I think
diseases.
it's actually one of my questions, but it's one of the ones I felt not the need to ask even because it's so obvious to everyone and everyone who's going to watch this pretty much in my audience. Everyone is aware that, the modern medical system, Rockefeller medicine, how they make money, surgery, pills, all this. No, nobody's interested in the root or getting healthy. So I don't even need to ask you questions to point to that. Everybody knows it. But I'm actually curious, similar question because the work you're doing is actually helping people heal on a very deep level, have you ever had any kind of pushback or anything like that, or from the mainstream system? Because it's really always been against anyone who's doing any real healing. So I'm just curious if you've ever experienced anything like, somebody trying to shut you up or discredit you or anything because of what you're doing.
No.
That's amazing to me, actually.
Interesting.
It's like you snuck through.
I just had to think about it. No,
Okay,
no,
amazing.
because I'm so 100% convinced of what I'm doing that I think it just kind of peels off. Or I just don't tune into that kind of frequency,
Yeah,
it never happens. It's actually on the contrary.
yeah.
Okay?
That's it. That's amazing because I can think.
To wake up. Just to give you another example, I worked with a guy, a big player, $800 million worth. Yeah. And the guy got sick with cancer. Yeah. So pancreas cancer, which is of course very severe. And I do home visits with him, right? And we talked. I just kind of help him to regulate the nervous system, to resource himself, and if he wants to talk about the fear of death, I'm there. I'm not forcing it. I'm just kind of holding him emotionally in this incredible, terrible diagnosis. But then at some point, he's doing the chemotherapy. And then at some point, he told me, nearly a bit kind of embarrassed, he said to me, and you know what? I go to all those other doctors who use very unconventional treatments, I go to all of them, who then treat me with ivermectin and I don't know what, and then I also saw a book of Joe Dispenza lying there, healing yourself and something like that. So that's amazing. People, you would not expect it from a person like him. You would just not, right? But he was nearly a little bit embarrassed that he does that. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
But he's doing it. And I felt so happy for him,
Tell him to keep doing that and cut the chemo, probably.
Probably will, because it just destroys the person, severely.
Sure,
So, but this is good news that people, do wake up and just don't believe anything anymore what the health system tells you, right? How to heal. I mean, for myself already, when I was studying social psychology. Already then in my early 20s, I felt like, okay, I don't get the real answers why people become mentally challenged, because at that time, it was during the 80s, like nobody was talking about alternative medicine and trauma, but I already felt deep, deep in my heart, no, I don't get the right answers here. Yeah. It's like, what they teach you is how to, people who have been in a dysfunction, it's mentally, through burnout, anxiety, you try to help them to get a bit back into balance, but then you send them back into dysfunctional surroundings. And then I felt like, oh, what's the big deal here? It's like, this can't work. It just can't work, you know? And nobody was referring at the time to being, to meditation, to mindfulness, to, you know, taking responsibility for your own healing abilities. Nobody was kind of talking about that. But I intuitively already felt there's something profound missing, which then put me on my whole spiritual church search. You know, I then went to India, and that's another story. Yeah, but already then I felt, you know, this is just not enough. You know, nobody refers to the real you, the being. You know, nobody. So that was very frustrating. But I found my way to get the answers, right? So again, it's in, you know, it's in your own responsibility also to seek for different answers. And then back again, you know, either you're a consumer, you just accept everything, or you are that spiritual person, you know, who longs for truth.
Well, that's always been my biggest frustration. Something I've just never understood. Some beings don't seem to be interested in truth at all. They're just
Yeah,
in the lower chakra survival. They have enough money,
yes.
enough, blah blah blah. Life is good. Don't worry about the rest. But once I started my spiritual journey, nothing mattered other than the truth about me and the world and God and what's happening here. And I was absolutely obsessed with it. And I've only met a few people that were really obsessed with it, and other people don't seem to care. And I think personally, I just started to understand that some souls, we're all just where we are in our evolution, and some just aren't at that place yet where they have this genuine pull for these deeper questions, and it's only the ego that would judge them and say they need to be doing something different. No, maybe they need another 1,000 lifetimes and then they're ready. So we're infinite beings, so what's another 1,000 lifetimes? It's nothing, you know.
Yeah. I also dropped my judgments then on those people, you know. Okay, it's their decision, it's their life, it's their body. They can do what they want, you know. And then, but also then not wasting your energy on people who decide to be deep asleep, right?
Yeah, it's tough. I used to, before I went on my path, I used to really love judging people. It made me feel so good knowing that I'm better than someone else. And so I actually really miss that, just between me and you. I missed the
Yeah,
judging. It was great.
yeah, because it gives you instant relief and a dopamine shot. That's what it does. That's why it feels so good to
So good.
judge people,
So
you
good.
know.
I miss me before I became so enlightened. It was a lot of fun. But serious question though. So if somebody's listening to this and they kind of have a feeling, maybe they've already started to work on themselves a little bit, but they haven't. I suspect a lot of people, the self-improvement has been around a really long time. People are working out, they're eating better, maybe they're cutting out toxic relationships. These are all wonderful things, of course. But I can see a lot of people listening to this and saying, okay, but I haven't really started the shadow work. And is there anything you can tell people other than, of course, go and do the intensive with you? I recommend it. It absolutely changed my life. But is there some practice or some one or two things you can suggest to someone to start where they can actually start becoming at least aware of some of their patterns, maybe even improving in some way on a personal level, you know?
Yeah. I'm not interested in self-improvement. I'm interested in transformation. That's the first thing. I don't like the word self-improvement because, it always comes from a place, there's something wrong with me and I have to fix it. I'm broken, fix it. And that's not how I look at people. I don't see people broken who need to be fixed. I find it very arrogant, right? And a bit violent to look at people like that, So if somebody wants to start a journey, where we most find our past is in when we're getting triggered, and getting triggered means, I'm not seen here, I'm not respected, I'm not understood, I'm not loved, I'm not seen, I'm not this and that. So especially in relationships, we have that all the time, right? And then the way we deal with that trigger, usually we go into immediately and frantically our defense mechanism kick in, right? we either get judgmental, or we control, or we go in denial. Yeah. So, or we regress to an earlier stage of childhood and start crying instead of setting a boundary. So the defense, or I cut off, I want to punish the other person, right? So, getting an awareness when you are triggered, what do you do? Where do you go when you're triggered? When I get triggered, I get righteous. Just like, then I just want to be right. Yeah. So when you detect that, and that already takes a bit of awareness, of course, yeah, because it's so much easier to blame, just not take responsibility for your triggers. But in that moment, instead of just kind of getting so lost in your triggers, you might take a moment just to take a deep breath. That's something you can easily do. Just not immediately react when you feel triggered. You maybe want to pause, take a deep breath, look a bit, oh, where did that land in my body right now? It's all about embodiment, right? The healing work is about embodiment, not outside of yourself. So where does it land? And then maybe you notice, oh, I get a terrible tension in my belly, my shoulders get totally stiff, I feel like I'm holding my breath. So you kind of bring it back to the body. Because when we do that work, you always want to start with the body, actually. Because the body carries all the past trauma and everything. Yeah. Again, not outside you. So you then notice, okay, it's landing in my chest. Then maybe you ask yourself, okay, what is it actually I'm really feeling here? Yeah, it might be not about being right or telling the other person it's your fault. Maybe I just feel sad because I don't feel seen here. And then just like taking a moment to feel that sadness in you, right? Just, okay, acknowledging, yes, sadness, I see you. Or acknowledging, yes, anger, I see you here. And taking out the judgments towards yourself. A first step, if you want to do the work, you have to become so kind and friendly towards yourself. Nobody opens under pressure. That's something I really had to learn the hard way, because during the 80s, it was all about confrontation and putting people on their edge and pushing boundaries, which then people actually just put them in a fight-flight response, and if people are in a fight-flight response, they cannot even feel themselves, period. Very simple. If you don't feel safe, you can't feel yourself. So, that's why it's so crucial then to take the judgment out. So, okay, I feel anger. Okay, I feel sadness. Okay, I feel shame. Yeah. And then kind of telling yourself, it might be a very old feeling that I don't feel seen right now. And remember and reminding yourself, okay, I'm actually safe right now because I am a grown-up, I'm an adult, I'm not dependent anymore, for example, right? Like just in the triggers itself, you find all the work you need to do. Yeah, because, that we become so triggered by people just shows how much work needs to be done in the sense of, where you hold your shame, your unworthiness, your rage and everything. Yeah? So that is always maybe a good entry point. But you want to start so that you can work with all the parts you pushed away. The first step is bring some kindness to that, friendliness. Otherwise, you can't even work with it, right? You can't. You just can't. You just then again have to push it away because it's too painful to deal with it. Because we need to understand that the parts we push into, in the basement of the psyche, they hold a lot of pain. Because at the core, they lead us to the core. I'm not loved here, absence of love. And that's the most painful thing to feel for people is the absence of love, and how devastating that is. Not just the love from other people, but the love for yourself, the love from existence, love from God, as you want to call it like that, you know. And that's the most challenging part when I work with people and they face that kind of love. It's like an emptiness. It's such a deprivation. It's so painful. It's nearly, when you really go into and let yourself feel it, it's nearly like annihilation. You know, you feel, you know, I can't deal with that. I'm dying. But then once you deeply face it and you be with it, and you embrace it and you hold it, you know, incredible, beautiful spaces can open up. You know, you probably know that from yourself. You know? So repression, you know, just to say in a nutshell, repression doesn't work. It just doesn't. You know? I wish it would be so easy.
Yeah, just ignore all the stuff you don't like, put it over there.
Sorry.
Um, yeah, I mean, would you go so far as to say, you know, I mean, it all comes down to love, doesn't it? I mean, all unhappiness, all our suffering really comes down to there's a lack of love, whether, you know, whether it's from us, from other people, but all these traumas, all these things, it's just preventing us from feeling that natural love that is our true nature. It all comes down to that.
Love is all there is. You know? It's the very substance this whole universe is made of.
Yep.
If you can see it, if you can feel it, if you can access it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
That's what all the great masters are talking about.
sometimes these days I just get flowers everywhere in my house. That's just the face. I just love to look at those flowers. And then when I look at those flowers, I feel like, wow, there's a whole world of beauty just for the sake of beauty, you know? Colors, forms, shapes. That's love. For the sake of beauty, it exists, you know? And it makes me so happy. Yeah. And I feel that then in myself. This is, you know, the very substance you're made of. I believe it's, you know, come from non-separation. Non-separation is love. So
It seems ridiculous because all we want is love, and if that's the case, then why are we always cutting ourselves off from it? It's the worst self-sabotage. What are we doing?
yeah, that's sometimes the deeper question where I also ask myself, you know, why is there so much suffering? You know, when love is the answer, right? But it's just, you know, that to be human means there's also a shadow. It's just part of it. We have to embrace and you know, start loving ourselves in the shadow as well. You know, that's the real, so that's the real self-love, you know, embracing all of it, darkest places, embracing them, not kind of endorsing them or kind of, you know, I'm not talking about that, but really accepting it. Yeah, because you know, that shadow cannot heal through, you know, through separation and judgments. It just can't. You know? It can only heal in, you know, being seen and being held and being able to, okay, that's also part of me. And can I love myself, you know, and I feel envious more, you know?
I have a theory. Could it be that on some energetic level, like we're not looking at the shadow because we're afraid if the light hits the shadow and it's actually exposed and it destroys it, it's like a part of our ego, it's a part of us is actually being destroyed.
Yes,
Does that
exactly.
make sense?
It totally makes sense, you
Yeah.
know, and
Because
it's
we're
the light.
fighting so hard not to look at this thing. It's like a baby. It's like we want to hold on to it, but it's the thing that's destroying us. You know, it's madness in a way.
It is only the light which can detect the shadow, right? So, you know, all the parts we repress, if we don't bring them up, they cannot evaporate in the light, in the light, right? We have to do the work, you know, and the fear or the resistance to go to those places is because, you know, there is then so much fear those unmet needs and everything what we pushed into shadow, that's where our fears and our anxieties are, the pain. And people are so afraid of feeling pain. And then the avoidance of the real pain, which just breaks your heart, you're there with it. The avoidance of that creates the endless suffering for people, that's the real suffering, is the avoidance of the pain. If you just accept pain as part of human nature, you can trust into your ability that you can process it. We are made for processing deep emotions and feelings. We can do that.
It's almost as if
yeah,
it's almost as if the feeling is the healing.
Exactly. My saying.
I learned that from, okay. In case anyone's watching it, that she taught that. Yeah, so.
It is healing, and we take it further. We can't heal what we can't feel. So we need to learn how to, allow our feelings and the feelings in the dark spectrum.
Yeah. And this is, I think, why society for so long has, especially with men, no, don't feel it, suck it up, don't cry, don't scream, just be a man, be strong. It destroys you from the inside. The quickest way to destroy yourself is hold everything in and don't express and don't let anything to flow. It's emotional suicide.
It is, and it's also unpleasant to be around such people,
Yeah.
I rather surround myself with people, who allow themselves to be vulnerable, who are humble, who are kind of, okay, that's me. I find it much more relaxing, and when people do that, or if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, something like a permission slip to the other person to maybe also just a bit of defensiveness and open up. And then we meet, and then intimacy is happening. Then that's what I feel is, part of being human is to love each other, to create connections which are safe. That's where the whole thing starts. It doesn't start in denial and in our defensiveness. It's wasting your life if you're so stuck being defensive about everything and every little thing, right? I just don't think it's fun to be to be around such people.
Yeah.
But we often most got hurt when we were the most vulnerable as children, in our need to be loved, in our need to be held. And remember, the child-parents relationship is one of dependency. You can't do it on your own yet. So, and then being exactly abandoned in that neediness to be held and to be loved and to be supported and to be mirrored, that's often when we got abandoned the most, and those the feelings people don't want to feel again.
Yeah.
But it's not about wallowing in that pain, don't get me wrong, not at all, but just don't avoid it. It's worse to dig into it, because the shadow also holds a lot of energy which you don't have available for your life. It needs energy to keep those things repressed. It needs, your nervous system is constantly working to keep those shadow parts basically at bay, and a nervous system which constantly has to push things away, over time, over years, that's actually, the soil of where all those diseases can arise in your body, right? Because the whole system is tense. And we know, unregulated nervous system, it creates inflammation, it creates cancer, digestion problems, all that, because the system is dysregulated.
Have you actually seen, have you had experiences where people will, have a big breakthrough energetically with their shadow, but then have a direct physical 3D health improvement of some kind, where you're
Yes.
like, wow, is there like an
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah.
some kind of
Yes.
fascinating story around
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I do have. Also, I don't like focus on then the medical part, but I have seen uh, migraines of 20 years vanishing once people express their anger. Migraine has a lot to do with this terrible pressure in your body and system, which usually is then related to unexpressed anger, for example. And then just releasing that in a safe way. One woman based a report, her migraine was gone. Or I remember we had one woman with how do you say fibromyalgia?
Yeah,
Fibro-
fibromyalgia, yeah,
She couldn't,
fibromyalgia.
I can never say that.
Yeah, even for me, I'm like, fibromyalgia. It's a mouthful.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, she could at times hardly walk because she had so much pain in her muscles and her bones, and we were even wondering, does it make sense for her to come to the retreat? Because the retreat is also physical demanding, as you know. But I had a feeling, no, I take her, and I totally kind of told her, you just do it the way you can do it, right? There are always ways around. Let's say when we do strong emotion release, find your own way in it, and it might be very different from what the rest of the group is doing, you know. And then already after 2 days, that woman, she participated in all the structures, even the physical demanding ones. So at some point, I walked up to her and said, "Okay, how's it going in your body with your fibromyalgia, right?" And she said, "I can't feel it anymore. I feel totally strong in my body." And she was so kind of, what? I haven't experienced that state of my body since decades. I haven't felt like that. And she walked out of after 7 days, with zero pain in her body. I don't know if it came back later. I don't know. I haven't followed up on that. But already that is incredible proof. Once you release, the tension your body holds. I mean, just imagine if you do it consciously, tensing up the body, how much energy that takes. Imagine, you do this over years. You damage your whole immune system. Yeah. So yeah, of course, you can't separate, the shadow from your body.
So if anyone's listening to this and they are in chronic pain in some condition, what would be like the one thing you would say to them?
What would I say to them? I would say, first take out all the judgments you might have about being sick. Because, there is a whole very bad new age thing that, you know, if you're really kind of doing all the meditations and all that, you shouldn't get sick, or it's nearly a judgment if you're sick, then something spiritually went wrong, Some people judge it like that. They really do. So the first thing I would say, don't saying, it's not your fault in that way, Don't take the judgments away from that your body is in such a condition. And just encourage them, that healing is possible, just trusting it, and even let's say, your body is so rotten by cancer already, but maybe you're still able to heal yourself emotionally in the sense of finally letting go, finally asking for help. Then that's healing. Healing can happen in any stage, I would say. I think it can happen in the last breath you take in your life, and that's what also Carl Gustav Jung says, the process of individuation, more and more becoming the real you, it's an endless process until you take your last breath. It's a process of, integration and basically shedding away all the old layers. So I think healing is possible on all levels. right? Take, because I experienced that people, who are severely sick, they think, oh, I've done something wrong, or, I'm not good, and that's why I have this. That's violent to look at it. Look at it like kindness. Okay, my body expresses something. What is it my body wants to tell me, actually, right?
Yeah, curiosity.
Around that, just again, inviting people to, look at themselves with just friendliness and kindness. Because this is so, we're so used to touch ourselves on all levels and push ourselves, right? I have that done my whole life, and only since a few years I really went into embodiment of being kind to myself. I'm a perfectionist, so whatever I do, it's just never sufficient or never good enough. That also, of course, keeps you in a constant tension with things. So, and I still kind of work with that in myself, like, Jesus, Puja, what is this? Because on a bad day, to be honest, on a bad day, when I'm exhausted or overwhelmed, I still think I'm the worst person on the planet, But the difference here is now I don't believe those thoughts to be true anymore. I know when I feel like that, okay, then I tell myself, okay, Puja, your nervous system is so dysregulated right now, and then this kind of darkness comes up, and that's the place where you go. So regulate, and I actively do things to regulate my state again. And I think that's also the responsibility of each person to learn how to regulate your nervous system. I think we owe that to ourselves, because a regulated nervous system is a good nervous system. Then it functions at its best, and you have access to so much more creativity and ideas. A whole different field opens up than when you are in this kind of fight-flight mode. Your body is only busy into how do I get out of it anymore, right?
So by regulate, you just mean to get calm, to get centered.
Regulation means again, not only doing the nervous system practices, and there are thousands of practices around it, but it's also how do you hold yourself when your own shadow comes up? How do you deal with yourself in that way? This I find even more important than doing all the regulation exercises. Do I hold myself here, or do I, on top of everything, kind of put myself down? And that's, I would say, the real self-love.
Yeah. Amazing.
We're going deep here.
Yeah, I know. It's the most important.
I can totally feel my heart talking about all this. It's like, but I feel this is, being human in the light and in the shadows, and learning to feel and accept ourselves in the shadow. And just maybe another little example for people who have difficulties to own their own shadow, to give you just a very simple kind of idea. Let's say you walking on the street, and then in front of you, somebody just throws their plastic cup of coffee. They just throw it on the street. Okay, so and you're just behind that person. So I give you a few ideas how you can deal with that. Maybe you're that person who gets so worked up and you think, this is horrible, this is terrible. People like this shouldn't be even allowed to be on streets, right? Walk on streets, right? You totally have a overly strong reaction. Then you can be nearly sure there is some shadow activated. Or maybe you are that person who sees that and thinks, oh, that's pretty uncool, just to kind of carelessly throw your plastic cup on the street. And maybe you say something to the person, or maybe you're the one who then even picks up that cup and throws it in the garbage bin, right? So, or maybe you're the one who becomes super righteous, like, probably more what I would do. Look, I would never do that. Throwing my cup just kind of careless like that.
I just like to join them. I was going to keep my cup, but you know what? If they're just going to be like that, I'm just gonna throw my cup too.
Yeah.
That's how I like to do it.
What you do. Okay, cool. Cool. I would tell myself, convince myself, I would never do that. This is terrible. Here comes in the righteousness. Sorry, I grew up with a super German righteous father, right? God bless him. And but that's an example where we can see how shadow operates. And when we look at it, to work with shadow, we need to look in a way like, yes, maybe you are not that person who would throw an empty cup just carelessly on the street, on the road. Maybe you are not this person. But if you take the energy of the act, throwing that cup of coffee on the road, you could look into, okay, what does that stand for if somebody does that? So then you can see things like, okay, it's about being careless. It's about, let's say, being entitled, I have the right to do that. It's about kind of, oh, I don't care who picks that up for me. It could be just being rude. And then once you label the things, what it stands for, throwing a cup away like that, you can bring it back to yourself. And then you need to ask yourself, okay, have I maybe not ever been entitled in my life? Where have I been ruthless? Where have I been inconsiderate and gave a shit? And then you can bring it back to yourself. And that's a very good tool how to detect that shadow in you. Take it off the act itself. Maybe you also would never be that person who kills another person, hopefully. Yeah. Again, if you take it off the act and you look at it, this is disrespectful towards life, reverence to life. And then you need to bring again back, where have I been very respectless and not honoring reverence for life? And then you can look at your own shadow. So that's a bit a trick how you can work with when you work with people on shadow, because when you work with people on their shadow, first thing where they go is resistance. You don't want to look at it. Me disrespectful, never. Me inconsiderate, never. Right? Because we want to believe we are good.
It's amazing. Oh, we bullshit ourselves so much.
Understand,
it's amazing.
take it off the act itself, and then look at it. And that's where you find the shadow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. My girlfriend pointed something out, and then she said it, and then I was like, oh, you're right. And I saw the same pattern in life. Every time we judge and we say, I would never do that. That's terrible. Then the universe puts you in a position where 6 months later, you're doing exactly that thing you were judging for someone else for. It's amazing. When you notice it, you go, oh my God, don't judge anyone ever, because you're going to feel really stupid really soon.
Yes. The thing is, you also then attract people who act that out for you. Because the thing is, with the shadow parts in us, as I said, there is a huge charge. There's an energy, and life, especially the brain, wants to bring things to completion. Yeah, so in a way, those unmet parts in us, or that, that shadow parts, actually, there's an energy of wanting to come to a completion with that. And by working through that, that creates the completion, feeling the feelings, the rage, the anger, the sadness, and so on. Then it comes for a completion. And that's when you then basically, that energy gets available and other people don't have to act it out. I'm also very orderly. So of course I attract boyfriends who have been terribly messy. But since I owned that messy part in me, because I also have areas where I'm completely messy, those kind of boyfriends didn't appear any longer. because, there's no frequency for it. That's magic. So again, that's what Carl Jung says. Everything what you judge in people, it's an unintegrated part in you. So that's the invitation then to take it back and look at it. And it's not only the negative things, the shadow, and that's the interesting part people don't know so much about. There's also something like what we call a golden shadow. These are all the positive things. Let's say you adore somebody who's incredibly brilliant in talking, who's good in creating friendships, and you overly adore those person. Then you adore all those good abilities in the other person, but you don't own your own goodness or your own skills or your own talents. Yeah? This is what we call, in a nutshell, the golden shadow. So it's not just the dark shadow, there's also a golden shadow. What we project on other people and think we are not that. We are not that good. We are not that brilliant. We are not that lovable. We are not that, etc., etc. Yeah. And that creates often for people why they adore such people so extremely. Because again, they don't own their own brilliancy and their own beauty and their own talents, which we all have, in different ways. That's something, you bring with you from wherever you come.
Man.
Either way, doing the shadow work it's just brilliant, and it's so enriching your life, and it creates an incredible relaxation because, just imagine you don't have to judge everybody at all times, unless you open your Instagram in the morning.
Yeah. Anybody or yourself, which is the big one.
Yeah, and that's the love we're longing for, right? It creates relaxation. And when you feel relaxed, your nervous system is so happy and creates health for you.
If only they taught us this stuff when we were kids.
Exactly. Nobody taught me. And yeah, but you also know our parents, they had so many unprocessed wounds themselves. And from that place, actually, from their own woundedness, it created a shadow in the family. Also families have shadows. You're putting on your glasses, is there too much light here
Yeah.
happening?
Right when we were talking about self-love, I'm like, this light is extremely bright here, and I lasted as long as I could, and then I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm putting the glasses on. I wanted to connect with you as much as I could, and I said, no, I'm going to get a headache. I can't do it anymore. So,
Exactly. We need to
but
bring you, as I don't have to tell you, without bringing also humor in or in, to our human nature, I just want to shoot myself. Yeah.
humor is extremely important.
Yeah,
Extremely
or
important.
light again, sometimes, when I in a retreat or I saw so many clients during the day, and sometimes, I just also need to unwind and just really talk bullshit and, just again, bring humor in there.
You have to. I'm actually in a multi-week, really interesting discussion with my beloved, and we're talking about because she really she's very deep also on the spiritual path. So she's really hardcore. She meditates every day, like she's the real deal. And if I do anything out of integrity or any bullshit, she calls me on it. I say, "What is this? This is bullshit." She doesn't mess around. And so we're in this, she always sees it. If I'm not present or if I put on my comedy character, I have a very funny ego or I'm very funny, I'm a
Really,
professional.
really.
Listen, you stop your sarcasm and judgment, Puja. All right? I
Oh,
feel
yes,
judged.
I am consciously, and I enjoy it.
I feel judged. And so I'm so used to putting on this funny
I love
character.
you.
I
You
know
know
you.
I love
I
you.
know you
Otherwise,
love
I
me.
tell you, otherwise I wouldn't sit here.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yes.
So I'm trying to be serious now. I'm trying to make a serious point. So because I have this very defined character that can get attention and get people to like him by being funny and charismatic, and I've been working on it for a very long time, as soon as I put a little bit of that on in any way that's not really present in the moment, authentic, she goes, "Who is this person? What are you doing?" And she just sees it right away and she slices me with a brutal knife. It's absolutely brutal. And it brings up a really interesting question. Because what I say to her is, yes, yes, I know I can put it on sometimes and it's bullshit, but also on a deep soul level, I really like making people laugh. There's a part of my soul that actually I like it. It makes me happy to make people smile and tell a joke. It's part of me. And so I'm actually trying to find the balance of like, yes, on the one side, I can just be happy and love and there's nothing needs to be said. And then there's the ego that's just, it goes out of control and then where's that middle where I'm just comfortable being myself happy. And in the moment when it arises spontaneously, then it comes out. And I can see sometimes me being pulled into that character because it's such a learned behavior for me. And anyway, so it's an ongoing thing of,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yeah.
it's
No, I
interesting.
would say, making fun because you cover, as a defense mechanism, covering pain, it's just not funny. But, but being funny for the sake of fun, of joy, joy is one of a natural capacity we have. I mean, look at children, they're in ecstasy, they're so
Yeah.
joyful. That's something different, right? So it's good she calls you on that. But again, those defense mechanisms, I also stopped judging them because they're
Mm,
just adaptation of a child, dealing with lots of dysfunction or lovelessness, and actually developing those defense mechanisms had been brilliant then.
yeah.
It kind of saved you and kept you sane. But, it's just that those adaptations we learned as children to deal with it and cope, they just don't work anymore in our adult life, because when we're stuck in defenses, we can never really be open with somebody. We might keep us safe, but Gabor, he calls it, Dr. Gabor, he calls it like what was then, a good friend, those defense mechanism is now a stupid friend. I like that.
Yeah. That applies to me 100% sometimes.
So just watch the stupid friends.
Yeah. And I've noticed within myself that sometimes my humor can be where it's attacking someone, and that's from a place of, defense or trying to put someone down. And, I can say, oh, well, that's what comedians do, but it's still not coming from that pure place. And other times it's absolutely just coming from joy and love and just making people laugh or making fun of myself authentically, and then we can all have a laugh. Beautiful. This is coming from a very different, beautiful place and when it's coming from the old pattern. So I'm just becoming more and more aware of it over time, and it's fascinating. It's like a never ending journey, I would say.
It is not
Yeah,
ending. Thank God it's not ending because, thank God. When things end, it's death.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So here's a fun one for you. Let's say we put you in a room full of a bunch of 10-year-old kids, and you had some time with them to shape them and help them not be traumatized throughout their lives. What would you impart to them? What key things would you impart to them about self-awareness, about shadow, all these things we're talking about? If they're all 10-year-olds looking out at you.
Well, I would probably deeply encourage them to keep their childlike qualities, like spontaneity, ability to play, ability to trust, a natural sense of mysticism, of spirituality. Children are spiritual, they think everything is a wonder, like resiliency. When you start walking, you fall down a million times, you stand up again. Resiliency, something, fun, love, just encourage them into who they really are. And not because we all learned, we all learn to, in a playful way, of course, because we all learn to kind of twist ourselves into a form which we believe is then more likable and lovable. And just having to do that, it's just so terrible. It's terrible, and we all did that. I did that, you did that, just twisting into a form where you then think people will like you for. Jesus, it just doesn't work, And I think it's just lately where I completely allowed myself to let go of that version. And so I would support that in children, like that their nature is good. That they just kind of can keep those qualities. They don't have to be somebody else other than who they really are, because that's the pain we're all in. That's the spiritual wound in every person, is that we have not been supported in enough support in who we really are, with our talents, with our gifts, with our merits. But we were loved more for what the parents thought was good for us, and in that way, we all had to leave our spiritual home. And that's the whole journey, to come back to that place, which is still there. The good news is this is still there. We never lose our real essence. It's just so covered by all those layers and layers of false identities to fit in and to be, to be good.
Yeah, that's why they make the matrix as they make it in the school system, to break you down and to get you disconnected from your soul, so you just follow orders and become a good worker, a good soldier. It's textbook, but that is something a lot of people are waking up to, and so many parents are actually putting their kids in all these other alternative schools where they can be free and soul can express itself. They're very different, these kids. I've met them. Unbelievable, unbelievable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're creative. They believe in themselves, They're not so full of self-doubt, because, self-doubt is another killer. You
Yeah.
don't, you just, you were robbed of your natural ability to trust yourself.
I think every parent in some way, because they've been conditioned by their parents and they had to comply and give up that part of themselves. On some level, the ego is going, well, I had to go through that conditioning, so now I'm going to condition my kids because I survived that. Even though you're literally passing down trauma and control and all this stuff, but it's normal because you went through it and your parents went through it, so it's just what you do. You tell your kids to shut up and do what they're told, and
Yeah,
it's
in many
brutal.
cases, you think this is love
Yes, yes.
and it's good for you, right? I mean, clearly, pain, it just travels through the family systems from one generation to the next. And, the only way to stop it is that you work it through. That's the only way you can stop it. Otherwise, you're just in that whole blindness and helplessness and being wounded. You just pass it on and burden your children with it.
Yeah.
So there is no other way. Unfortunately, there is no other way. You have to do the work. I take my classes off.
Oh, I see. You just want more points for authenticity. I know what you're trying to do. It's not going to work. Well,
And once you do the work, just to wrap it up, like, just life becomes again so beautiful in the sense of, it becomes unpredictable, but you trust your ability to deal with unpredictability. It becomes more adventurous, it becomes more loving, and you walk around and you feel like, what an amazing gift to have this body and experience it through all your senses. Sometimes when that energy comes through, and sometimes it just comes through by grace, I don't know, walking in a forest or looking at somebody with love. I feel like, I could get on my knees and just kind of cry out of gratefulness, of being able to experience all of this. This is amazing. I mean, to have this life with all its variations, I think this is so far out, actually, you know?
Oh, it's crazy when you really tune into it and you realize we're eternal consciousness and we decided to come in here and have a human life. It's completely insane. Amazing, but it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, but maybe crazy in a good way to be able also to experience all that. You know,
Absolutely.
that's where spirituality needs to land in your body, not in
Mm,
concept. Spirituality basically held in concepts, for me, it doesn't work. It needs to, you know, show in your daily life how you deal with yourself, how you deal with other people, how you deal with challenges in your life, you know. That's where you need to live it, and that's where you need to embody it. That
yeah.
it becomes lived reality and not just some ideas, you know. I have met
That's
people
it.
who consider themselves, you know, high spiritual people, but then you look at them, the body is tense, they're full of defenses, they're snobbish, they're arrogant, and then I feel like, oh, just leave me alone with all your concepts, you know. Yeah, I haven't done the work. You're just not embodying it, right?
Yeah. Embodiment is so huge. It's again, I resonate so much with what you're saying because again, in my own journey, I had a lot of profound mystical awakenings, but then I just became aware, well, how much am I embodying it? I can talk about love and the nature of God and the universe, but how loving am I being in every single moment with every person I meet? How present am I being with every person I meet? How much am I loving myself? How authentic am I being in, with myself, with everything in life? And that's so different than, oh, I had a spiritual awakening or I read a book or I do yoga every day. That doesn't matter. It's like, what is your embodied lived experience? That's what it comes down to. And that's a lifelong practice. Really, really, really. That's
Yes,
that's
and
the
to
good,
get
that's the deep stuff.
yeah, sorry. And to get there, you need to do the work, you know. As again, I met people, they maybe meditated their whole life until they turned blue in the face. If they
Mhm.
didn't do the work, it just doesn't work, you know. You have to do the work. I think there's no bypassing, there's no sugarcoating it, you know. It's like you don't want to, don't get me wrong, but you also don't want to indulge in it because then it also becomes the boss, yeah. But if you deny it, it just becomes the master and runs your life.
Yeah, I've realized recently with meditators, they can become aware. You can become aware of stuff and patterns, but unless you go into it and work through it, you haven't dealt with it. It's just step one is awareness. So I don't know. Do you think it can be actually worked out just with meditation, that you can actually see your shadow and really fully work it? I don't think so.
No,
Maybe
in essence,
some ninjas can, but I don't think so.
no. In my experience, 100% no, because you know, to heal trauma needs clearly therapeutic skills. Yeah, it needs a therapeutic intervention to deal with your nervous system, to heal old wounds. Meditation doesn't work with that. You know, that's often a big misunderstanding. And please don't get me wrong, I'm a meditator since 40 years. Yeah. With meditation, you know, you also learn to disidentify yourself a lot from all those negative thoughts. You know, you learn to be more into presence, you learn more to refer to the real you. But if you think meditation alone does the job, that's where you then move into the danger of spiritual bypassing, right? We have to, you know, the way I always frame it, we have to dive into our own underworld and deal with it. You know, you cannot just meditate over it. Then you're just overriding trauma, right? And you can feel it, you know, again, you can feel it, you know, somebody says, oh, I handled all my traumas and pain, unmet needs and pain through I'm just meditating. They just put another layer of control on it. Yeah. You know, I could watch my breath. I know how to be present. I know how to, no, it's control them. The way I understand meditation is actually being in a choiceless awareness. You don't choose what you're aware of, you know. That's more how I experience meditation.
Interesting.
Are we coming to the end of this talk?
I mean, I feel like it's been such a beautiful talk. It was real.
We can talk longer, I know.
We dropped some crazy knowledge.
Yeah, I hope people, can learn from it, and I hope, we reach people's heart. So it's not just words, but also a transmission of a grateful heart, heart which had been also broken many times, right? But still dares to open up over and over again,
That's a really big thing. So many people that have some, bad experience, they get hurt and they close up and they never open. I know people, they've never opened up again. It's crazy, but they're just stuck in it. Yeah.
And even when people do it, they do it out of the best intention because they want to basically make sure I don't get hurt again. But, to be alive means, if you live with an open heart, yes, that precious heart can be broken over and over again. But, the answer is not to close off, because that becomes even more painful than the pain itself,
Yeah. And 100%. And then also when we come into a deeper understanding that even if some experience is painful, there's a learning in it. We're maturing as souls in all of these experiences, right? If our higher self, if the creator didn't want us experiencing these things, they wouldn't be happening, right? So there's depth in that, right? It's not just happening random.
But you can only then feel the depths once you experienced it and went through it.
Yeah, that's right. If you don't open to it.
Yeah, if you say too early, oh yeah, that's what your soul wants you to feel, again, that's a bit violent. But once you really move through it and experience it, and then in spite of all the pain, you dare to open your heart again, that's something very different,
Yeah. Very good.
So I get a bit kind of allergic towards when then people say, oh, that's what your soul chooses, that pain. I find it a bit violent. I find it, it's more like, yes, once you then experience what life wants to teach you, then you understand the deeper meaning behind it, that this is exactly maybe what your soul needed to experience. But first you have to experience it.
Yeah.
To find the gold in it, you have to experience it.
Yeah. Yeah, and people are afraid of experience because it might be painful, and they're playing it safe, and that's death. That's death before before you actually die physically. You're already dead on the inside.
And that's why I always encourage people, don't be afraid to feel all those feelings which you need to feel. You're made for that perfectly. You will be able to digest it, you will be able to metabolize it, trust in that ability also of your heart, that it can do that.
Beautiful. Puja, it's been fantastic. I think
Yes.
the big question at the end of this very authentic and heartfelt interview, should I give you a shameless plug, or do you want to shamelessly promote yourself? What would feel more in alignment for you?
You do it.
So,
And I might get something.
so I had a very traumatic childhood, lots of death, no love. Kids made fun of me. It was terrible. So I'd been working on myself for quite some time, and I did Puja's intensive 7-day course. It rocked me. I was not ready for how intense it was, and at the end, I felt like I was floating. Like I literally was so much lighter, and I could breathe, and I felt joy, which I hadn't felt for years. So it was genuinely one of the most profound things I've ever done. I still tell people about it all the time. I'll just meet people in random cafes, and if shadow work comes up, I'll say, look, if you're really serious, I'll tell you the name of my teacher. And once in a while, people say, okay, yeah, what is it? And they'll write your name down. So anyone who really wants to do it, pujalepp.com. I'll put the links underneath the video, and you'll thank me later. That's all I'll say. I'm only doing it so people thank me, and then my ego can, because I'm so spiritual, if we don't boost my ego up a little bit, I'm afraid I'll leave the body back to source. So I need a little bit of ego boosting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't need to have a bad childhood to do the work. You just need parents, basically. And you just, because we all have been conditioned through parents, you know, school systems, dysfunctional systems, society, you know, you just need to have a longing to, you know, to experience the real you. And, you know, as I said before, the world told you how to be and how to behave, you know. And I think it's an incredible gift to do this healing work, you know. It's like I find if you can do it, we're very fortunate. And it's just ever so rewarding. You know, it's not that basically you won't face changes again later. You will, but you know, you also learn many skills how to deal differently with those things, other than just kind of putting yourself down or keeping it all up. You know, I was reading a sentence I really liked where somebody said, people don't fake depression or burnout, they fake being okay.
Right.
I love that, you know, just in a nutshell. So if you're tired of basically telling yourself lies or, you know, telling yourself all the time, I'm okay, when you're actually not, that's the work you can, you know, I offer. I'm here in service, as I said. No plan B. This is what life had, you know, in store for me doing that work.
Puja, it's been an absolute pleasure. Of course, you're going to put yours back on, of course, because we're doing opposite. Um, it's always wonderful. It was wonderful hanging out with you that week, and then we've done a little recording in the past. It's always wonderful just hanging out and connecting and really talking about one of the most
Yes.
important things in the world, which is healing ourselves, so we can really enjoy this beautiful human experience. So,
I
thank you so
totally loved,
much.
yes, I totally loved it. I totally loved talking to you, you know, and in a way, you know, I'm fond of you in what you do, you know, in your own way, how you basically try to rise consciousness and you go out, you know, and do also all those crazy interventions you did, you know. I never dared to do that, but you can do it, you know, that's your ability. And I just love that about you, that, you know, you do the work in your way.
Thanks for seeing me. I see you too, sister. Thank you. Thank you for being on the planet at this time and helping, because it makes a huge impact. It really, really does. Yeah.
We stay tuned, right? Bye,
See you
my
next
dear.
one. Okay. Ciao,
Yes,
ciao.
bye.